episode. All right.
YouTube stream is working.
Cool. Damn it, I did use that one. Not enough time. I can't find a good GIF now. Yeah, I guess we'll go with that. Episode 135 of the Ego Chall Podcast, sharing preseason power rankings and more before the CDL season kicks off. Links below. Okay, post. Now, Twitch, YouTube. Testing. Okay, Twitch sounds fine. Jeez, that delay is crazy. Okay. YouTube is good, and I'm good.
Ready to get started?
Sure.
Hello, and welcome to episode 135 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we're talking about ranked play, the bad, I guess, not much good coming out of the first few weeks of Black Ops 6 ranked play. Gentlemen's agreements, DAs are back, and they are more unpopular than ever. And we're doing our preseason power rankings and predictions on this episode. This will be kind of a new season of the Ego Chall Podcast. I think this is the fourth season we've done the podcast for the CDL. So really excited about that as we get closer and closer to the beginning of the 2025 CDL season, or if Bink is in a bad mood, or if I want to put him in a bad mood, the 2024-25 CDL season. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
I was doing pretty well till about 10 seconds ago, but we'll move on from that pretty quickly. And yeah, like you said, season's starting pretty soon here, starting up on Friday, so we got a lot to talk about.
So let's start with, I think, the biggest news, and it's something we almost forgot to put into the show until just a few minutes ago. But Vickle, who was a part of the Miami Heretics this past season and the Florida Mutineers before then, he announced that he is retiring from competitive Call of Duty. He announced on December 1st, so on Sunday afternoon. He posted on Twitter saying, quote, "Dear all, just to say goodbye and thank you after 2 incredible seasons with Heretics and Mutineers in the CDL and an amazing one with Toronto Ultra and Challengers. I want to express my deepest gratitude to my loving and supportive fans, all my teammates, coaching staff, managers, colleagues, rivals, and opponents along the journey, and all the people working in and around the league. Please keep providing fun and joy to the COD community." He said that he is returning to continue his studies in mathematics at university, and that he is, kind of stepping away from competitive Call of Duty. This was a surprise to me. I think it would probably be a surprise to you. Both of us, I think, imagined Vickle as a starting member of the 2025 Miami Heretics. So first reactions and just overall sense of Vickle's retirement or departure from competitive Call of Duty for the time being.
Yeah, so I think, like you said, it definitely was a surprise, but I do think there were some rumors going around when they added Rancor, I believe, to the roster, and more recently it sounded like the rumors were suggesting that he was potentially going to be the fourth starter in place of Vickle for Miami heading into this year. But similar to Miami's situation last year with a 5-man roster where we didn't know the roster until basically their first match, that's the situation we're in right now. So we don't know for sure what the deal was. Maybe Vickle wasn't going to start, and that led to his decision to just step down.
Mm-hmm.
That's just speculation. We don't know for sure, but that seems potentially likely, at least in my head. But outside of all that, I mean, he's still a pretty young kid. I'm pretty sure I saw somebody say he's still 21 or 22, something like that. Good on him for going back to try and finish his education, and good luck with all of that. This is literally a kid, you think about it, he's only in the league a couple years, but we literally saw him grow up in front of our eyes, literally went through a hair transplant and everything like that. So it was, obviously we had Clayster and Accuracy retiring earlier this offseason. Those are much more longer tenured players than Vickle, but I do think in his short time in the main spotlight of the CDL, he did leave a lasting impression, and he seemed like a funny kid, and he was doing the Cristiano Ronaldo celebration on stage, and he had some moments on streams. I think he streamed ranked play with Merc and Maven sometimes too, and so yeah, I mean, maybe he'll go back into streaming or go into streaming full time too while he's going to school and stuff. Not sure, but wish him the best whatever he decides to do. And yeah, I guess we still even after this we still don't technically know what Miami's roster is, which just seems like that's the strat with this 5-man team heading into each of the last 2 seasons.
Yeah, so like you said, he was part of that 5-man roster last year. They were kind of like a professional sports team, and that they were like, well, we're just not going to reveal who's starting, and there was even some confusion among the players, it seemed, or some changes before the season last year as to who was starting for that first Miami Heretics team. And now it seems like Vickle is retiring or stepping away, and now you have this roster, and I'm not exactly sure what to even make of it if Vickle was on that team. So I think taking a known quantity out of it makes them even more hard to judge from that point of view. But Vickle, he had a lot of success in challengers. Obviously, having that much success in the CDL is hard to come by, but he was part of a top 6 finish at champs last year, so that was $80,000 for the team. That's pretty good. He got second at Challengers Finals in 2022. He won a few Challengers Opens, which are, that's the pit. That's very, very difficult to get through those open brackets. But I'm really glad to see that he's going back to school. He has something to kind of fall back on. Maybe he's made a little bit of money from the CDL and competitive COD, where it's not as big of a deal, or it's not as harsh to come up with that money. But hopefully it all works out for him. He obviously, to go back for mathematics, that seems pretty smart. I mean, I don't know. You don't see a lot of competitive COD players talking about going to school for math, but good luck to him.
Slasher.
Yeah, Slasher. Yeah, he did computer engineering,
robotic engineering, I think.
Yeah. So not a lot of competitive COD players going to college in general, but good luck to him. I hope the best for him. But yeah, he seems like a really cool guy, and his hair looks great. So what more can you say about him? Um, let's talk about ranked play real quick though, because you were talking about how you were really liking COD. In general, this release has been pretty entertaining for you, from what you said. The ranked play stuff did not go according to plan. Ranked play came out earlier than ever, or it seemed like it did, late November. A really early release for a very highly anticipated feature of the game, but cheaters have kind of ruined it, to a certain extent. If you're on console, it's probably not as big of a deal, but for the competitive players that are on PC, especially the streamers, that has turned into a major issue. What do you think of this ranked play stuff? Obviously, we've seen Havoc, he got to number one, I believe, on the ranked play ladder, and then it was like, yeah, I can't play this anymore because the cheating is too bad. So what do you make of the complaints about cheating and hacking in ranked play so far?
Yeah, it's obviously very unfortunate. You think like one step forward, two steps back with like, yeah, we're getting ranked play what feels like the earliest ever, but there's just massive hacking going on. So that's definitely unfortunate. I haven't played ranked play at all. I've been too busy grinding zombies and absolutely loving that. So, for any of you guys listening who might be frustrated with ranked play or whatever, definitely give zombies a shot. They made it way easier than ever before, especially if you've never played zombies before. You can basically jump right in and do whatever you want. If you want to go for the late round runs like a try hard, then that's where it'll start to get a little bit harder. But um, yeah, I really just I haven't felt the urge to jump into range play yet, and I think that's more so just because I've been enjoying zombies so much as opposed to all this like cheating and hacking going on. I don't think that's like played a huge factor in it for me. And I do want to. I mean, again, I haven't played it myself, so I don't know how true it is. But I feel like if like you and me wanted to play ranked, it's a lot different than, uh, like Octane and Havoc and those guys trying to play ranked. Where at the higher ranks, they're probably more likely to see cheaters than,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know, more casual people in the lower ranks. So, that's something to keep in mind too. But I think you know, kind of you kind of brought it up with the console and PC thing there, and I think there was somebody talking about maybe it was on the flank or something. They were talking about how like console players have to have crossplay enabled. There was some sort of discussion they were having where like it's affecting console too just as much just because they have to like play against the PC players, and I mean that just goes back to the whole conversation we've had since the CDL moved to PC from console is just how many issues there seemingly have been, like the scan and repair stuff that's literally like crashed games in the CDL for years now. I remember all the way back
Mm-hmm.
to Cold War. um, and obviously there's been some benefits to playing on PC, but there have also been issues that come along with it. And I remember us talking about it at one point, like when we were discussing the Microsoft and Activision merger and acquisition, all that. Like, would this be like the return to Xbox because Microsoft's owning it now? And obviously that could still happen, but um, not haven't heard anything of the like or anything concrete or even not concrete really. So yeah, I mean, long-winded way of saying it's unfortunate what's going on in ranked play. It would have been a really good thing for COD if they got ranked play out right away and it just was smooth sailing. But obviously, as is tradition with COD at this point, it's not smooth sailing for uh many different facets. So hopefully I think they've had some responses with like anti-cheat updates and quotes or whatever about that. I haven't really looked into it too much, but hopefully we start to see a more concrete fix be implemented so that you like you mentioned like guys like Havoc and stuff, if they're not playing ranked, then that's like a huge negative to just the whole ranked ecosystem in
Mm-hmm.
general, right? Because like you get guys like that who, obviously Havoc's a former pro, but that can be like that segue for some of these other fans to like, Havoc isn't a pro right now. He was a pro. He's still really good at the game, and he can bridge the gap between those casual fans and somebody could be like, "Oh, the Havoc, it's got 4.5K viewers right now. He's playing ranked play. Let me go check this out. Oh, this looks cool. Oh, what's the CDL?" And that can bring some fans potentially to the league as a whole. So whole circle of life thing. It could work out, but if there's massive cheating and hacking going on in these streamers and former pros and whatnot aren't playing ranked because of that, that's just hurting COD and the CDL in general.
Yeah, I totally agree. The thing that is lost on, in my opinion, lost on Activision or Microsoft now. I think I'll give them a grace period, or maybe, there needs to be some time between the acquisition and, when I think we could probably see actual results and changes from Microsoft's ownership to just like Activision being its own entity. So I'll give Microsoft a pass for the moment, but I think what is lost on Activision and has been lost on Activision in the past is that ranked play is a marketing tool. Of course, it is a feature that you can take out to the public and so they can enjoy the game. It's a different way to enjoy and play Call of Duty. But what they need to look at it as is this is the greatest marketing tool that we could have for competitive Call of Duty and by extension, the Call of Duty League. This is the Call of Duty League is something that Activision or Microsoft owns. It is theirs. It is their baby, essentially. So they should want to build that up as great as they can. One way to do that is to build a reliable, entertaining, and enticing ranked play that people look and see, wow, I want to get the game. I want to play ranked play because I see Havoc, I see Scump, I see Nadeshot, etc. Whatever streamer it is, they're having a lot of fun doing it. So I'm going to get on Black Ops 6 and I'm going to play ranked play. That was enticing for me when I was, getting into competitive COD. I saw game battles, I saw 360 icons, etc. UMG at one point, and you get onto those websites and you start playing because you see other people have fun playing them. If ranked play is not fun and the streamers are like, this sucks, this is draining. This has happened with Warzone in the past where there's been a lot of cheating or just a lot of problems in general. And you see those streamers say, it's just not worth my time. And I think there will be a trickle-down effect with players saying, well, if it's not worth Shroud's time or if it's not worth Scump's time, it's not worth my time. I'm not going to play this game if they're saying it's so bad. Of course, not everyone is going to follow that, but I don't think that, I think that COD and Activision and Microsoft should take that very seriously and do everything they can to fix this. But anti-cheat has been such a major issue basically since Call of Duty was like, we're going to be a PC game now. When it was on console, it was very rarely an issue. It's for the console players, it's still not much of an issue if you're just sticking to console players. But PC is a massive audience for competitive Call of Duty now and Call of Duty in general with Warzone, that it needs to be fixed. It needs to be top notch. And I just don't see Call of Duty kind of making it a priority from the outside, at least. It doesn't seem like the anti-cheat is that big of a priority, which sucks.
And I'm not going to pretend to be some like sort of expert on hacking or modding or anything like that because I've never been involved in any of that. But just going back to my earliest days of playing Call of Duty all the way back in World at War, like you had on console, obviously you still had like people who would hack. It would happen. You would run into people or they would find like glitch spots on the map. They use those, and you would find modded lobbies where people would like get you max prestige, get you all the camos, all that yada yada. That would happen like, I don't want to say, I don't know how frequently really, but it happened at the time when that game was live, right? When it was that year for the game, like it is right now for Black Ops 6, like it would happen. It really happened though the following year, I feel like. So like after, like, I don't know, Black Ops, I can't. The old games are the ones really that stuck in my head, like COD 4, World at War, and stuff like that. So I feel like, World at War comes out, COD 4, like there were a ton of like modded lobbies and stuff for that. And as it gets older, like more people are like hacking in those older games. It felt like to me at least. Whereas nowadays, it's like it is happening in real time in the current game that is supposed to be like driving the income, and maybe that's why like it didn't matter for Activision back in the day. The next game comes out, why do they care about the other game? People are just
Yeah.
paying for this new game. So, maybe that's part of it and why it was never a priority. But now that it's happening frequently, very frequently, seemingly in live time on the current title, I feel like that has to be the like where Activision has to want to be like, okay, we if it's causing people to stop wanting to play the game or spending money on the game, then we got to do something about it. And maybe that's what it really takes here.
Yeah, it's been an issue last 4 or 5 years. And maybe it's like you're saying, they were behind the curve. They were not expecting this to be an issue because it hadn't been an issue for a decade or so before that. So they were, chugging along thinking, well, we run into problems here or there, but it's really not anything that affects us on a grand scale. Now it is a grand scale, and it has been for several years now. And there should be no excuses from this point forward, and really there shouldn't have been excuses the last few years, but it does feel like it is happening over and over and over again, and it's happening to people in very high profile positions, like a Scump, like a Nade Shot, like a Havoc, where they're running into players like every single game or multiple times in a day, and they're just like, yeah, they're cheating. And granted, that happens in other games. That happens in Counter-Strike. That I'm sure that happens in Overwatch. I'm sure it happens in a lot of other competitive games, specifically ones that are on PC a lot. But I mean, that's something that every single game and developer should be looking at and trying to fix, because it does affect the enjoyment. It does affect how many people play it. And when you're a game like Call of Duty where you buy it for $60-$70 every single year, then that's something that affects how people are buying it in general. That's not really much of an issue when you're looking at say League of Legends. Obviously different, not an FPS game, but for League of Legends, it's a free to play game. So if you don't like it, it's not the end of the world. They're relying on you to buy skins and in-game cosmetics, where Call of Duty wants you to do that, but a lot of the money that they get is upfront, where you're paying $60-$70 to buy the game, and that's it. And if you don't spend any other money on the game, you still spent $60-$70 to buy it. And that's a huge difference in how they do things. But if people are not having fun with it if they're not having fun in Black Ops 6, when the next game gets released, what if they just say, well, I'm not going to spend $60-$70 anymore because it wasn't fun last year. It's probably not going to be fun next year. So that's something that Activision, Microsoft, whoever, the developers especially, that's something that they have to fix, and they have to decide if it's so important that they make it a priority as they move forward. But we'll see how things work out. I'm a little hesitant to say that Activision or Microsoft will change or make this better, because they don't have a great track record. I don't think that Call of Duty developers in general have a great track record of resolving issues in a timely fashion. Usually it's years after the fact that they fix something, or they say they fix it and it just turns into a bigger mess. But it is something that needs to be fixed. Another thing that probably needs to be fixed as we move forward is gentlemen's agreements. We've talked about this quite a few times on the podcast. This has been debated about so much over the last 2 weeks or so in the competitive Call of Duty space. But gentlemen's agreements, for people who are not, not aware, or maybe are newer viewers to competitive Call of Duty, GAs, as they are commonly known, are not official rules, but they are rules abided by the players, specifically in the CDL, to not use a certain weapon, not use a certain ability or a feature of the game. And everyone at the time, or it's thought that they agree to these things. Of course, GAs can be broken, and that causes controversy in and of itself. But GAs are essentially ways to make it more competitively viable, more competitive in general. But The players themselves are making these GAs. They are agreeing to these GAs. And that is not a popular thing among CDL fans. And even this is the first time that I've seen the former pro players, the streamers, the very popular members of the community that are not active players. This is one of the first times that I've seen those people say this is BS, and I can't stand the COD players deciding that this is what should happen or this is what shouldn't happen, and these GAs don't make any sense. I'd like to get your opinion on this, Bink, because is it just me, or has it felt like players like Zuma, and I've seen Shroud get in on this, but I've seen multiple very popular streamers come out and say these GAs are stupid and the current CDL players are kind of ruining it for competitive Call of Duty in general. Am I kind of off base for thinking that it's more common now than it has been in the past?
I think it's just because over the years now it's become a lot more like public. Like last year, like Zuma was like the quote unquote GA commissioner, and he was going around trying to like police this, and like he was giving out red cards and joking like that when people were like stair glitching or whatever in matches. So like it's definitely become more of a public topic. Like whereas in the past, I think Aches was even talking about on one of the flank episodes, like GAs happened back in the older games, but nobody really knew about it because no one was talking about it like to public. Like the players knew what they were and weren't going to use, but nobody really knew outside of that, and it wasn't as big of a deal. So I don't know, you know, necessarily everything behind that, and I really haven't been keeping up with the GA drama this time around, just because it hasn't been in season yet, so I haven't really gotten a feel for how it is gonna affect the upcoming season. I know the one thing was like the melee weapons or the knives, like being in and being out or whatever the case may be. But the biggest thing with GAs and why I have always it's gonna be like kind of like a multifaceted answer here, because I think there are some reasons why GAs are necessary and good, but at the same time there's some reasons why like you said, they've been taking things a little too far, especially in recent years. Is that Call of Duty in itself as a game is not competitive focused, or it's not created to just be a competitive game like like a counter CS:GO or CS2 or League of Legends. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not where the focus is. The competitive COD community is a subsection of just Call of Duty that has spawned from this more casual game, and the developers are not developing the game from a competitive mindset, and that's why there's so many like maps that just don't fit for what we've come as a community to expect from a competitive map, and just one among many issues that arise because, as I said, Call of Duty is competitively it is not competitively founded. It's just a result of the more casual game. um at the same time, though, my thing with GAs that's seemingly always been what happens over the years is that these guns get GA'd by the pros, and then even if the devs do address the gun and nerf it or tweak it in some way, it is never revisited. So let's just use like this year, like the XM4, the M4 traditionally in Call of Duty was seemingly GA'd right away. If Treyarch comes out literally tomorrow and says they've nerfed it into the ground and it's not anywhere close to as good as it was, even if they like say that publicly and just mega nerf it, the pros won't go back and test it and be like, oh, we'll un-GA this because the gun sucks now. It just won't happen. They'll just continue to use what they start to use, and that's been my gripe with GAs over the years, is that thing. And again, this goes back to that give and take where the devs aren't tweaking the guns
Mm-hmm.
necessarily a ton or for a competitive mindset. So the pros have to do something to try and make the gameplay that they're playing, for their jobs and livelihoods as fair and balanced as possible. They have to step in and do something. That's where the GAs come in. But then when you're GAing a ton of stuff and then changes are made and they aren't testing that stuff after changes are made, that's where I start to have an issue with it. So it's really a never-ending loop until I know we've talked about it, like something like COD Mobile, which has like, you know, legendary COD guns and maps from past games that we know work for a competitive basis. Like it until some like competitive version of that is made where that is the main focus and that's the game that the CDL is played on, which I don't think that'll ever happen because Activision makes much money from a yearly release. Um, this is going to be some instance of an issue, and finding that fine line there between having a balanced competitive game and getting rid of too much stuff and having too many GAs, that's always going to be a tug of war.
So what you were saying is completely factual in that Call of Duty is made for casual players. It is made for the Jimmies and Joes that buy it on Christmas and they drop .6 KDs and team deathmatch. That's kind of the player base. Like I forget what the percentage was, but it's like 60% of players like that play multiplayer like only play TDM because that's the first one at the top of the menu. It's it's something ridiculous like that where people aren't experimenting. The vast majority and the people that are never probably going to watch the CDL because it's completely like it is a niche of a niche. Like there's competitive Call of Duty, which you can even lump in Warzone at this point. Like that there are tournaments and stuff, and like the CDL is a section of that. So it is a relatively small community when you look at how popular and how widely played Call of Duty is on a grand scale. So GAs are, I think, a good thing in essence or in theory. So you have you don't have bouncing betties, you don't have claymores, you don't have all of the things that people are like, this is absolutely ridiculous. You don't have riot shields. So that's good. I'm sure there are some people that disagree with that. I believe Clayster at one point advocated for the use of all of the weapons and all of the equipment in Call of Duty to kind of bridge the gap between the competitive community and the casual community. I wouldn't go that far because I don't think that if you add claymores and bouncing betties to competitive, I don't think that you're going to add a bunch of casual players that are now going to watch competitive. I just don't see that happening. I think that is probably that's fool's gold. You hope that it happens, but I don't think that it would actually happen. But GAs, like you were saying, they can go too far, and they often do. And the reason that they do is because the players are the ones that get to decide what are GA'd and what is not. And granted, that's the logical thing to do because the players play this game. They know the game better than anybody. They probably, on a player level, they know it better than some of the developers know the game because they put more hours into finding little ways to get better or to be better than other players. At the same point, though, the players are doing it to benefit themselves. They're not altruistic. They're not saying, well, this is what is better for competitive Call of Duty in general. A lot of them are thinking, would this help my team? Would this help me personally? And we can GA based off of that. They're probably not going to say that very much because it makes them look selfish, because it is selfish, but that's how it is. And like you were saying, some players are just never going to revisit any of these guns, any of the maps, any of the features that get GA'd at the beginning of the game. They're just like, that's gone. Like, you might as well just throw it away, take it out of the game, because they're just never going to do anything with it. They're never going to go back and say, maybe we should, be open-minded about this. It's just not going to happen unless they are absolutely forced to do that. So it comes down to the developers. It comes down to the CDL to say, hey, we will tune these weapons as often and as much as we need to strike a competitive balance where the competitive players enjoy doing this or enjoy playing with these guns, and it's still not ridiculous for casual players. That's hard. The developers have an impossible job, in my opinion, but that's the only way that this is going to work. It's only going to work if the developers and the people running the CDL are working in unison to make this as best of a competitive environment as possible, and they work with the players to do that. And I think the players probably take advantage of it because they don't trust the developers to do the right thing or to work with them. And I think that they're probably right in doing that. This time around, it's been sniping was, I think, the biggest thing of this latest round of GAs. That's something that cannot be GA'd, in my opinion, because sniping is one of the hallmarks of Call of Duty. It is, sniping clans were huge, a huge part of two of the biggest brands in competitive Call of Duty, FaZe and Optic. And if you're, saying by extension, LA Thieves, because Nadeshot was a part of Optic, you can't take away sniping. It's too much into the fabric of Call of Duty and by extension competitive Call of Duty. So that's my opinion on that.
And to be clear too, as far as I'm aware at least, and this GA for sniping was not like or what I'm understanding was that GA the attachments for snipers were GA'd no matter what. So it was a bare sniper with no attachments on it that they were being allowed to use, and then they took it a step further and said no snipers, period. Like that is where it starts to cross the line in my eyes. If you're and I know, again, haven't been keeping up with it too much, but I did catch whatever flank it was where they were talking about it, and Zuma was the one who was saying like sniping is the worst in this game that it has been in a while, and we're still just getting rid of it off the rip and like not even like considering it, especially at the point of not allowing a sniper with no attachments. Like that's basically like if you don't have attachments on it, that thing, you miss your shot, your reticle is kicking up to the sky and you're getting beamed by someone if they shoot back. Like so it would be, yeah, it's a one shot kill, and that's what a lot of the pros want to avoid. But if you miss your shot, it could be super punishing with no attachments on it to begin with. So hopefully they find some way to try and work that out. Again, I haven't done a ton of sniping in multiplayer, so I don't really have a good feel for it myself. But if someone like Zuma, who even like he's someone who back in the day was known for sniping a little bit when he wasn't busy just flanking people like crazy, and I'd like to hear. I know Octane got his start in competitive before he actually started being a pro as a sniper, so I'd like to hear what he has to say about it. And end of the day, yeah, I think that's a pretty good example for like GAs going to the extreme, especially in this case where it's like we're not even talking like the XM4 or whatever the ARs they GA'd, like they were GAing those with attachments and stuff. We're GAing a gun now where you could potentially use it without any attachments. Like that thing is not going to be overpowered to the point where it should just be banned in my eyes.
Yeah, and it causes so many issues. I don't necessarily think that it is going to cause people to not watch the CDL, because the CDL is not popular by really any means. Like if you're looking at comparing it to most other esports, like a CDL regular season match is getting 30, 40, 50,000 viewers. I don't think that you're going to have a massive decrease in viewership because sniping is a part of it. So you could make that argument as like it doesn't really matter from that point of view. But if you're just looking at it from the fact that Call of Duty is based on sniping, and it is a huge part of just like the reputation of Call of Duty, and that you are not actually being authentic to the esport and to the game that you're playing if you don't use snipers, or at some point. Obviously, it's really only effective in search and destroy, or maybe if you want to do like break offs for like hard point, if there's like a cross that you want to look down for like the beginning of a game. But like other than that, it doesn't really matter. And I think it's kind of ridiculous, but we've talked about it before, and I'm sure we will talk about it again, because GAs will, as far as I know, probably always be a part of the CDL and competitive Call of Duty. So we'll talk about it at some point again, sometime this season, I'm sure. Let's talk about power rankings now, because we did this, I think, a few times last season, more unofficial check-ins on our power rankings. But as the CDL is going to start its next season this week, starts on Friday. We're recording this on Monday. The podcast comes out on Tuesday. So we're only a few days away from the beginning of the 2025 CDL season. We haven't seen most of these rosters play actual matches or we've seen a few of them play in the 4-team tournament. We've seen maybe some scrims from a few of these other teams, but in general, we have not seen much from any of these teams, and it's going to be hard to rank them, but that's exactly what we're going to try to do. So we came up with our own power rankings. We did not compare power rankings before the episode. So Bink made his, I made mine, and we can kind of see how they compare and contrast. Bink, do you want to talk about your power rankings first and kind of your thought process behind where you put each team?
Sure. I did this literally 5 minutes before we went live, really quick, so I really didn't put too much thought into it. But I think most people would agree with at least the top of my power rankings. Maybe the bottom is where gets a little murky, especially depending on the performance of certain teams so far in scrims and whatnot. Because I haven't been really keeping an eye on that. So like maybe some team that on paper you'd expect to be at the bottom has been playing really well in scrims at the beginning of the year, and I'm not aware of that. But barring that, this is just my expectations. So I think we've talked about it enough over past episodes where S tier should be almost no surprise that it's Phase, Optic, and LAT, and no necessary order there. We talked about almost all last year it being a 4-team league, so now with the super team joining LA Thieves, it becoming a 3-team league, we talked about that. It seems pretty straightforward in my eyes. In A tier, I got Toronto and C9, Cloud9 New York. Um, I feel like that the Toronto pick could be a little debatable, just depending on how the team works off the rip. But I'm putting my faith in the tissue being an issue there, so it might be a little skeptical, or for some people they're a little debatable. And then Cloud9, sort of similar situation there. I'm not really sure who's gonna be like that team that really pushes those other teams in the top three. And I think on paper, at least, these are the two teams that have a good shot to do it. I will say, um, a massive caveat here is I got the LAG and slash Gentlemates in C tier because we still don't technically officially know what their roster is, or if they have a roster, or what the heck's going on there. Literally, I think after we recorded the last show, the day after, there was the report that like Gentlemates is combining with LAG or something. So the reported roster is uh, Kismet, Skies, Priesta, and Lens, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know for sure. So that's kind of like just like kind of ignore LEG being there. I really just put them there because we don't really know what the heck's going on. So they're kind of in limbo in the middle. That's a team though. That's literally so that's the New York Subliners COD Champs winning team from 2023 with Lens minus Hydra. Obviously Hydra was a big part of that roster, but it is a team that has a lot of players who have seen success in a very recent window. So that's a team that could push you up into that A tier, I think, if that is the actual team and if they perform well. But again, we don't know for sure, so not confidently throwing them in right away. And then middle of the pack, Carolina, Vancouver Surge, Miami Heretics, and Minnesota. Really, I think out of those, I expect Carolina to be the best, but that's another team that could struggle. It's got some guys who like Slasher and Vivid who've been in and out of the league. Um, but it has obviously Gwyn was rookie of the year last year, so I think of that group, I would expect Carolina to be the best. Again, Seattle, or I knew I was going to say Seattle, Vancouver Surge. Um, Lots going to be on Abuza and O4 to try and be the stars of this team, and how they perform is going to directly impact what we see from that squad. Miami, especially with Vickle gone now, we got potentially two new players there. Don't even really know the starting roster, so not sure there. And then the Minnesota squad, I think, has some potential. I talked about that in past episodes with me being a fan of Geo and Nero. As having players who are just like they have that explosive potential, but can they do it on a consistent basis? So, um, yeah, some questions there in the middle of the pack. And then D tier had to put Boston down low. I know it's a different squad, and I know they performed better at the end of the season last year at the World Cup as opposed to how they did in the regular season. Um, but yeah, just I still until we see what they're capable of on a consistent basis. I think bottom of the leagues where we expect them, and then Vegas Falcons. I think they're basically at the bottom of everybody's power rankings at this point until we see more from those guys and see what they're capable of. So, think this is pretty straightforward. I'm really not sure how yours are going to look or what you're going to have different, but that's what I got.
Yeah, so I have a lot of similarities. Of course, I did, kind of a different setup for my power rankings as, we talked about in the past. Like some people do their power rankings 1 through 12, and they try to rank them, the entire league, and try to put them in order. I think that's really difficult, especially for the preseason, because we just don't even know what these teams are going to look like. So the way that I did it is, hold on, let me make sure this is zoomed in so it doesn't look as bad. So the way I did it was I have 4 tiers. I think you had 5, if I'm not mistaken. So the first tier at the very top is Optic. So I put them as the champion tier because until someone proves that they can beat them, I have to put them at the very top. Although I do think that the 2 teams in the next tier, which I labeled the contenders tier, Atlanta FaZe and LA Thieves, I think those 2 teams are just right there with Optic. Like I think those 3 are so far and away above the other 9 that maybe you could even put a tier between contenders and my next one where it's just a buffer. It's just nobody is there because they are so far ahead of everyone else. So champion tier, Optic, contenders, FaZe, and Thieves. And then I have 4 teams in the next tier, which I considered battle for 4th, which we saw last year. We were really going battle for 5th at that point because we had 4 really good teams. And I think that these 4 teams, in my opinion, are the ones that will kind of eat each other alive in the middle of the pack and try to get that 4th seed. I put the Vancouver Surge, which I was kind of debating on some of these teams, whether they were going to be in that 4, 5, 6 range, or if they were going to be more 9, 10 range. But I put Vancouver Surge, the Gorillas Mate, whatever BS name that they're going with for this season, the Toronto Ultra, and Cloud9 New York. So those 4 teams, I put them in the battle for 4th tier. And then I put my final tier was Champs Fringe. So the first 3 tiers, that's 7 teams total. Of course, we have 8 teams that make champs. So the final 5 teams, who I think are, at least at this point in time, I think are going to be fighting for that final spot at champs, would be the Boston Breach, the Carolina Royal Ravens, the Miami Heretics, the Minnesota Rocker, and the Las Vegas Falcons. Of course, you can make the case like you did, where you think Boston and Vegas are kind of a tier below some of those other teams, and I can't really argue it. I just kind of want to see how it works out because I have no idea what to expect of the Vegas Falcons in particular, because we've only seen them at the Esports World Cup. I don't know what to really make of that tournament in general. So we're going to need a bigger body of work and more to go off of. And of course, a lot of these other teams are debuting new rosters or heavily altered rosters. So it's going to be a difficult thing to suss out as we go across the CDL season, but that's where I have it now. I have Optic at the top, then you have FaZe and LAT in the next tier. I almost did Seattle, Vancouver, LAG, Toronto, and C9 in the 3rd tier, and then Boston, Carolina, Miami, Minnesota, and Vegas in that final tier. So what do you make of these power rankings and maybe how they relate to yours?
I like the way you guys set up. I mean, you definitely one up me here by having the current logos and stuff. I don't know how you found that, but again, I also looked for literally 30 seconds before I did mine, and all I found was CDL 2022. So that's why, if you're watching the visual version of the podcast and you see my power rankings with the old logos, just ignore that and pretend it looks as good as Preston's here. But no, yeah, I think that makes sense. I think having 5 teams in the champs fringe is a little weird to me, but I guess it makes sense because technically, like, one of those 5 teams has got to be the 8th spot realistically, and then the other 4 don't make it. So I guess it makes sense. It's definitely like you texted me do power rankings. Like I was not coming up with a format like this off the rip,
Mhm.
but I think it's a cool way to put it together. And I think yeah, like if we followed this format for last year, it would kind of, we would have one champion, then three in contenders, and then it would be that battle of fifth, which was like a revolving door last year. It could very well be the
It was like
same this
5 or
year. We don't
6
really
teams.
know. Yeah. And then we had those teams at the bottom of the barrel battling it out. So it makes sense. End of the day, and talking through it, and makes sense. Interesting way to put it together, and definitely not something I would have thought of. So yeah, I like it.
And I'll probably, as we go and we do more power rankings, I will very likely change the format for the power rankings and like how I think about it. Because say Optic comes out and they lose a few games, or especially as we get to a LAN and FaZe beats Optic or the Thieves beat Optic, then it's not so much like, okay, like Optic is the favorite now. Like we can actually say, well, the Thieves and FaZe are right there.
They Optic went from worst to first last year, so
Yeah.
who really knows at this point?
And the way that I think about power rankings is if the season ended today, who is the most likely to win the championship or something along those lines? Like, how would you rank these teams if the season and like if we're like, all right, tomorrow is champs and we have to, you have to pick those teams. And granted, but I will say that this will change as we go because if Vegas just proves to be really really bad and say they're just very clearly the worst team, then there will be another tier and they will be probably in their own tier. Or maybe if Boston, has another stinker of a season, then they go back into the bottom tier. Because if, like we were talking about last season, if we did these power rankings, Boston would be in their own tier by themselves at the very bottom. And then you would have, three teams that are kind of like maybe they make champs, and then you have the battle for fifth, you have the contenders at the very top. And I think that'll probably be how we do it. I'm not sure how many iterations of the power rankings or how often we will do
Yeah.
these power rankings. But I think at the very least, we'll update them before or after each major as we go into kind of the new cycle of each major, because then we got to see them online. We got to see them, we'll have the minor to kind of judge them off of this like online tournament style situation. And then we'll obviously get to see them on LAN, which is what we think is going to be the most important and usually is what is the greatest indicator for how you're going to do as you get toward the end of the season. So we will do more of these and hopefully they will, be better and change. And I hope that it's not as well. It would be kind of fun if there were like 7 teams just kind of fighting for like 3 champ spots. That would be kind of fun, but I don't think that's how it works out most of the time. But that's the power rankings. I just showed the notes, I think. And then we will go to the preseason predictions. So the way that we're going to do it this year, we kind of do these as like an afterthought usually. But I figure that the way we do it this year is we go through a few awards. Some of them are more made up than the others. And then, kind of give what we think will be the champs winners and all of that stuff. I don't know if we did like MVP, I think, and maybe Rookie of the Year and then Champs winner in previous seasons. And I'm not sure if we ever got them right. Maybe FaZe one year, but I kind of doubt it at this point. I don't think like usually it's so unpredictable by the end of the season that it's very hard to predict these things with any kind of certainty. So first of all, let's do Rookie of the Year because this one's a weird award this year in particular because there are only, I believe, 6 rookies to start the CDL season. So there are 6 rookies on a roster in the CDL currently. And 4 of them are the Vegas Falcons. The entire Falcons roster are rookies. And then there's Super, who we're not sure will start for the Heretics, and Rancor, who I'm not sure will start for the Heretics. So do you think it's going to be one of these 6? Or are you going with someone that is not currently in the CDL but would qualify as a rookie?
Yeah, I'm going with someone not in the CDL right now. If I had to pick somebody on this list, for the players that are currently in the in the CDL, I'm gonna go with King of Body simply because they were talking on the flank for whatever episode I was watching, and apparently this guy like used to offer just like obscene amounts of money, like 5, 10 grand to like 1v1 like up up and coming players in NA and like some pro players and stuff like they retire. Like it was literally like a 10K chow he posted. He was playing like on like 100 ping or whatever, and it wasn't even like it would be like he was saying like if you beat me I'll give you 10K. If I win you don't have to give me anything. I just want to play you. So like he's got like that grind mentality if he wants to play against the best. And that's literally all I know. I don't even know how true that is. And it's was mentioned kind of in passing on the flank. So simply based on that, if I had to pick one of the guys that we know is in the league and starting as a rookie this year, I'll go with King of Body. But other than that, I think this is probably the year where uh, there's somebody who's not starting the season in the CDL has as good of a shot as anyone else to get Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I'm leaning that way too, but I also am not sure exactly who that would be outside of the
Yeah.
CDL. I was looking at the first Challengers Cup, the results, and it's like I don't even know. Like I think maybe Dylan Rex because I don't think he's ever been in the CDL, but he's
Nope.
been around a while.
Yeah.
He seems pretty likely to get called up if among the current like top challengers players. Like he's on a team filled with former CDL players. There's a chance that he gets called up. So like if there is someone outside of the CDL, I could see it being someone like Rex. But I'll go with Rancor. I mean, the Heretics are probably going to be better than Vegas, and like they might be a lot better if Vegas is really bad. And I'm not even sure if Super will start. I think Rancor might, so I'll go with Rancor. I'm not. It's probably the least confident that I could ever be with something like this because usually you get to a point where it's like, okay, like maybe Real last year before the season, you're like, okay, like I could see it. Like he's a pretty hyped up rookie. Same with like Abuza, who was like very, very hyped up coming in, or Linz. And then it turns out to be Gwyn, and it was pretty obvious, like very early in the season, that it was going to be Gwyn and he was going to be Rookie of the Year. So maybe it'll be clear at some point early in this year who will be Rookie of the Year, but right now I have absolutely no idea. But I will go with Rancor. You're going to go with someone not in the CDL. The next one, I was kind of like debating internally, like what this award should be. So in the NBA, there's the most improved player, someone who makes kind of a big leap from one year to the next. In the NFL, it's the Comeback Player of the Year award. Very famously, last year, Joe Flacco wins it over Damar Hamlin, despite Hamlin literally dying on the field, coming back to life, and then playing football again, where Joe Flacco just led the Browns to the playoffs. And somehow that was a greater feat than actually dying. But so I was thinking this as like most improved / comeback player of the year. And some of the examples that I came up with, and you can go outside of this, I was just kind of giving an example, was someone like Hook, who is not currently in the CDL, Arcity's Illy Purge, who got benched and went down to Challengers, is now back in the CDL, Snoopy, who had probably the worst PR year I've seen from a CDL player in a long, long time last season.
I mean, Illy's got to be up there too.
Yeah. Then there's guys like Envoy, who had a down year, for him. He could come back. Paul X back in the CDL. Mac, someone who was not even playing competitive Call of Duty last season, and has had some time away. Hixie hasn't been in the CDL for a little bit now. So, those are some of the examples. Who are you going to go with as, if you want to go most improved, or if you want to go comeback player of the year, however you want to look at it, but who would you pick?
All I'm saying is, off the rip, if Illy makes it back into the CDL this year at all, he has to be the comeback player after just everything he's gone through. And we'll name the award, the official Ego Chall Award for this comeback / most improved player award will be known as the Illy Award going forward. I think that's fair. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Just in general. Okay. So barring Illy making it back into the league, I think Mac is probably the most straightforward answer here. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he literally wasn't in the CDL. C9 is expected to be good, but I just still think he is such a wild card. Like if C9 is as good as some people expect, he's gonna have to contribute to that. So that would
Hmm.
make him like a leading candidate for this. But it's again after just not playing for a year competitively, it's gonna be tough. I feel like so I'm not. I'm a little hesitant to pick him, though. I do think he's a really strong candidate. And if you were to say you're picking Mac, like I wouldn't blame you, and I wouldn't be surprised. But I'm going with Vivid. I just feel like it's more of a little combo of most improved and comeback. We talked about it a little bit with like he was on, or Mac and him were kind of like rumored to be on a couple teams during the offseason and stuff. And for Vivid in particular, he was rumored to be going into challengers and playing as an AR, which I thought was kind of noteworthy and surprising just because we've seen Vivid in the past be like that super aggressive SMG player. Um, Now he is on a Carolina team with Gwyn and TJ, who you would expect. Again, it's going to depend on what the meta is looking like. I mean, there were before all the GAs and stuff. There were people that some of the pros tourneys and scrims and stuff was literally 8 XM4s on the map. So, um, this is going to be an opportunity now for Vivid. He's getting another shot in the CDL, and if he was potentially going to be mostly using an AR in challengers, depending on what the meta is looking like, and depending on this team, just because he has some other players who like to use a sub too, we might see an AR in his hands more, and that could be something that helps him, hit a new gear or something. So I think he's. I'm gonna go with Vivid. I think Mac's a really good shout too, and obviously Illy if he just makes it back, that's just a crazy story. So I think there's a lot of good candidates for this.
Yeah, so I had a lot of the same thought process as you. Illy is too much of a wild card in the sense like I don't know if he will actually be in the CDL at
Yeah.
for a significant portion of this season to be considered for this award, which is like a made up award. Like this isn't something that is actually given out, but we will decide at the end of the season who should be the winner of this award. So with that being said about Illy, I kind of had to disqualify him. I'm like, I think if he makes it and he's like in for before like major two, I think he gets it, but I'm not sure if that actually happens. So it came down to a few other names. Mac was, I think, the like you said, the most obvious. Just the way like his circumstances different than a lot of those others, and he is on probably the best team out of most of these players. So like he has the chance to be on like a kind of high profile big stage and be on like a winning team, whereas a lot of these other players are like not just frankly not going to be. They're going to be more like toward the 8th seed than the 4 seed. um but I'm gonna go with someone who is near and dear to my heart, my narrative heart really, and that is Snoopy, because my boy Snoopy took everything from the community last season. I defended him. I think we even as a podcast were like, you gotta like you have to either write it out or get rid of him now. Like there's really no in between. They wrote it out. It was not a good season whatsoever. He, his numbers were whatever, but like the win total was still bad. I'm just thinking that he's going to be better this season. Like I don't like I think he's going to drop numbers. That's just the way like I think of that team kind of built around him as it typically is. This is a team that you would hope, especially if they've had some coaching staff changes or whatnot. Like you would hope that this is a team that is all in on Snoopy and like just building this team. This is also a team that has been together for this entire offseason. So it's not really a new construction because this was the Esports World Cup team. I'm just thinking like this is maybe the year that Snoopy's able to get kind of back on track. I was thinking Envoy, but I just don't think there's going to be enough kills for him to even kind of
Yeah.
look like he's making, even if he is better as an individual, I just don't think the numbers will kind of back that up this season. So,
Yeah.
I'll go with Snoopy.
Yeah, I think Envoy's an interesting one, and I mean, that's he's a world champion, so it's
Yeah.
kind of weird to put him in this category, really. But like it would be purely like a statistical thing. Like he statistically struggled, especially in hard point, I believe, last year. If we see him start dropping like 1.2 KDs and stuff, then yeah, we can maybe talk about Envoy a little bit here. I will say too, I was thinking it, but I forgot to mention it. Is as much as I am saying like Vivid is a candidate here, I could also easily see him be like the first roster change on Carolina if Carolina struggles, right? Because like Gwen, rookie of the year, he's not going anywhere. TJ was a mid-season acquisition for Carolina last year, has that experience with Gwen already, so he probably wouldn't go anywhere. And then Slasher, he's like that vet, so like you feel like he probably wouldn't be the first one to go. So like, as much as like Vivid could be up there for like major most improved or comeback player of the year, he also could be a potential candidate for like first roster move if this team struggles out the gate. So something to keep in mind there too.
That reminded me, first roster change. Which team will be the first? I forget which team we said. Like we've done this. Okay, what was it?
Last year I said Miami, and it was
Yeah.
because we didn't know what the team was and they had 5 players. And I'm gonna say the same damn thing again this year if we do it.
Yeah. Who did I say?
The cop out answer.
I think
I don't know who you said, but we were both wrong because it was Carolina with GodRx stepping down and Real having the visa issues.
Yeah. So you're gonna go with Heretics, and like we don't even know which starters are.
Exactly.
So
that's a cop out answer.
Absolutely no idea. Man.
I think another good. I mean, I think Carolina's one there if they do struggle. Kind of like I was outlining. Minnesota, that's like 4 like youngish guys. Like if they struggle out the gate, they could be a potential candidate to pick someone up from challengers. And then if it's somebody who hasn't been in the CDL before, they would have like a line for rookie of the year. That's kind of where my head's at for that. Vegas is obviously one. I really don't see them making a change. I think they're going to play this whole year with this squad. And if they just absolutely get spit on, then maybe next year, like we see that roster move to challengers and then they try to sign like a quote unquote super team. But I'm not expecting that team to really, it would be tough for them to make a roster move unless they literally blew up the roster almost immediately. And I don't see that happening.
I'll go like off the beaten path here. I'll say Toronto because
Whoa.
they are used to winning. Like that is an organization that consistently fields a championship level roster. Of course, this is a different era for the Ultra because you don't have Scrappy, but I think you're like I think Beans and Joe Deceives, like I would have a really hard time believing Kleenex or Insight get dropped like early in the season. But like it's not out of the realm of possibility, at least in my opinion, for Beans or Joe to be replaced like before or after Major 1 or something like that. Like say they have like a top 12 finish at Major 1. And I think that is very possible because they had very poor performances at the beginning of a few majors last season. I just think like they're so accustomed to winning. If they don't win out of the gate or if they're so like out of sorts out of the gate, I do see it as a possibility. I think it's most likely, like you said, probably Miami or something along those lines, like Boston, Carolina, one of those teams that we expect to be closer to the bottom of the league than near the top or even in the middle, and those teams like are more likely to just make changes in general. So
another cop-out answer here. You could say LAG because they technically, whenever they announce their roster, it's going to be a roster change from the last roster they had. So
will they even spend any money to change the roster? Like that's my thing with a team like that. And that's kind of a way to think about Boston as well, because we have no idea what to think about them, and they didn't change the team at all from the Esports World Cup to now. Obviously there's so many kind of questions about what's happening financially and how this is going to go for them, because in previous seasons they've been committed to having an academy roster, been one of the only CDL teams to do so, and I don't think that they're doing that this season. I have a hard time believing it. And like I don't know, maybe Doug comes in for a game. I don't know, like I don't know what to expect with them if they aren't like on financial stable footing. So we'll see how it goes, but I'll say Toronto. You're going with Miami. We'll probably both be wrong and it'll be Optic or something. We'll see.
Wow.
MVP. So this is one that we can actually see, and we will actually, maybe you will get to vote on it. I don't know if I will, but right now, so we've had 5 season MVPs, CDL season MVPs. Shotzi was the inaugural one in 2020 when he was with the Dallas Empire, and then it was back-to-back years of phase guys, Simp in 21, Celium in 22, Hydra with the Subliners in 23, and then Simp wins his second last year in 24. Who are you going with as your regular season CDL MVP?
So, little way I was looking at it, because you had it listed out here, we had Shotzi 2020, Simp 2021, Celium 2022. So that's sub AR. Last 2 years were a sub and a sub with Hydra and Simp. So we follow that pattern. It's an AR, especially like I was saying, at least in the early days of this game, it seems like it's an AR favored game. So I'm going with Scrap off the bat. I think he could have made the case he was up there for MVP last year too. If this super team's going to fry the way a lot of people think they're going to fry, Scrap's obviously going to be a big part of it. So I'm going to go with him for my preseason MVP pick.
I will go with another, what would be a 2-time MVP, and I will go with Cell. Because we are, if you look at the numbers every single year, Celium is one of the top players statistically. And if you watch the games, you understand why that is. Like, he is a ridiculously good player. FaZe is also, every single year of the CDL so far, been the number 1 seed heading into champs. So that means that they've had a very good regular season, and that's going to be a part of it. Like, if you look at all of the MVPs, they have been like the 1 or 2 seed throughout the regular season, I believe. Maybe New York might have been like the 3rd seed or something, but like they've always been like going into champs, one of the top teams, and they had a good regular season. So I think it's going to be somebody from FaZe, Optic, or LAT. I see no chance for anybody outside of those 3 teams. So I'm going to go with Celium, just as, it's going to be hard because you always think about it like, is Simp the most impactful or most valuable player? Is Abizi, when we were debating if it was Simp or Abizi in 21, I think Cell has as good of a chance going into each year as anybody. If it's not Cell, I think Dashi has like a pretty good shot.
Sure.
I think the reputation of like he's not a winning player finally got shed with the champs win last season. And I think narrative wise, I think people will be more willing to give him his award or give him an MVP because of that. But again, Pred is also lurking in the shadows there.
I will say, I think, and this could obviously be a topic for, we dive into it a little bit more, because I'm saying this without like having the numbers right in front of me. But on a very surface level, I feel like a big part of Optic's success last year was Dashi's, and again, without talking to the guy or knowing for sure, like, it feels like he was willing to sacrifice a bit of the KD to, try and chase the W. Like, in the past, we were seeing him dropping a 1.2 KD plus, win or lose, right? It felt like last year, especially at the end, like, they were just trying to do whatever it took to win. And again, that's without really looking at the numbers or anything like that. So maybe that, hurts his MVP candidacy if that is the case. And again, he's got freaking 3 superstars surrounding him, so it's kind of like you were saying with Envoy, that there's only so many kills on the map. And but yeah, obviously there's a good shot Big Brucey just comes back, dropped 1.3 all year, and could win MVP. I could see that happening too.
I don't know what podcast it was, but Maniac like kind of asked Dashi about it, like, were you more willing or something along those lines? Like, did you kind of not focus on the numbers as much last season? And he basically said, yeah, because he looked at the players who were winning and was like, well, I'm better than that guy and I'm not winning. So what's going on? So I think there was like a legitimate, like, concerted effort from his point of view to be like, okay, like, it doesn't matter if I drop 1.4, I could drop a 1.1 and we win this map and we win a championship. So maybe it is going to be a trade-off and he won't have as great of numbers. But if they win consistently, I think it's going to go to one of them, and I don't see it being Kenny. Like, no offense to him, but like, he's more like short spurts. Like, his impact is going to be shown in like a tournament, not so much like over a long season, because again, he's not going to be like the 1.5 KD on that team. So I think it'll probably be somewhere between Pred and Dashy if an Optic player wins the season MVP, and I just kind of lean toward Dashy. But I'll go with Celium as my regular season MVP answer. You're going with Scrap. I think if they're not two of the top like 4 candidates, I would be stunned, to be honest. So this one is also a Ego Chall Podcast award. This is the Paris Legion Memorial Award. Rest in peace to our beloved Legion. Paris will not be winning champs, but they're winning champs in our hearts. So this is basically the worst team in the CDL in 2025. Past examples, the 2024 Boston Breach, the London Royal Ravens. I had to look it up because 2023 was kind of a close race, but the London Royal Ravens finished last. Of course, in 2022, the Paris Legion, the GOATs, the absolute kings of this category, 2-23, if I remember correctly off the top of my head, in the 2022 CDL season. And we had co-champions in 21 and 20, LAG in Paris in 21 and LAG in Seattle in 2020. LAG, just an incredible organization, top to bottom throughout the CDL's existence. But this is the team that you believe will be in 12th place. They will be starting their offseason earlier than expected, or probably about the same as we expect. So which team do you think will be the Paris Legion Memorial Award winners when we get to about June 2025?
I feel like the most straightforward answer is Vegas Falcons. Just, 4 guys haven't been in the CDL before. A lot of questions surrounding them. Don't really know what to expect from them. I feel like that's just like the generic cookie cutter answer that most people would give you. Yeah, I mean, Boston has got to be another candidate just based on last year. You could probably say like a team like Minnesota, there's some questions around them, just a bunch of young guys. Like if they start frying, you could see them do well, but if they don't mesh off the bat, like they could be a team that struggles and goes towards the bottom. So yeah, I think there's definitely some wiggle room here, but I feel like the straightforward answer for most people would expect is Vegas. And I mean, hey, I think I kind of said the same thing last year with Miami, in just the sense that like, we didn't really know what to expect from a lot of those guys coming back into the CDL for the first time, and obviously they did not come in last place. So Vegas, if everybody and a lot of people are putting Vegas Falcons at the bottom, they only got up to room to go up. And actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, I can't remember if I said Miami for last, because there was that whole LAG situation where a lot of people were like, "Oh, this LAG team's gonna suck," and the Enable was roasting the coach and everything like that. So I don't remember what I said, but I know I was saying like we don't know what to expect from Heretics really, and obviously they had a roller coaster season until they got Real and started clicking and all that stuff. But yada yada, that's last year. For now, yeah, I think straightforward answer is Vegas Falcons, and they're gonna have a lot of people doubting them off the rip, and it's gonna be on them to try and prove them wrong.
Yeah, I'm going with Vegas Falcons as well. I think Boston is going to be a strong contender, like you said. They're, it's going to be the rivalry to watch throughout the 2025 CDL season. But I don't know, like Boston last season was so weird because they lost pretty much only close games. If they win like half of their game 5s, they win like 12 games or won 12 matches last season. It's kind of ridiculous how close they were to winning those, but they were like, whatever, it was 2-11 in game 5s. It was ridiculous how close it was. I just don't have any faith in Vegas, and granted, like I don't know anything about them, so like that could be way off base, but I don't think that's an unpopular opinion, and they're going to kind of have to earn the respect of a lot of like CDL players, I would imagine, just like on like a team basis, because they know what they scrim like, but it's kind of different to go into these matches and see how they react to the very highest level of matches. So I'll go with Vegas. I think most people would probably pick them in this spot. Who do you think wins champs? So obviously 5 champions, 5 different champions. If so 2020 Dallas Empire, rest in peace. 21 FaZe, 22 LA Thieves, 23 New York Subliners, and then 24 Optic, because I'm not considering Optic as the successor to the Dallas Empire. So the 5 different teams, from my point of view, to win champs. Do you think there is a chance that we get a 6th different champion, which would mean that no Optic, no Cloud9, and no LAT, and no FaZe? Is there a chance that one of those 4 teams does not win champs this year?
I would be very surprised if that was the case, but I'm not going to expect that. I mean, everything we've talked about so far up to this point being a 3-team league and all that stuff seems like it's the 3 best answers you can really give at this point are Optic, FaZe, and LA Thieves. Don't think you can really go wrong with either of them. I'm just going to pick FaZe because I always pick FaZe, and feel like if somebody wanted to spend the time to go back and look, I've probably said FaZe was winning champs at the start of the season for each of these years, except for when I was saying Paris is winning champs, ironically. So, yeah, I'm going to go with FaZe.
I'm going to go with LAT. That is one of the nastiest rosters to ever be assembled, only rivaled by Optic's current roster and FaZe's current roster. So I'll go with LAT, but I don't think you could go wrong with any of those 3 teams.
Yeah.
If you said any combination.
To say Optic.
I just don't nobody's repeated before. Optic has notoriously struggled to win and be consistent. Like even last year, going into champs, they were as cold as they could possibly be, and then they get on a run and win champs. A lot of that is what happens in Call of Duty. New York was not like the strongest team consistently throughout the 23 season. They had ups and downs. FaZe was, in 21, they were like far and away the best team, but even they struggled at the end of the season, I believe, or maybe it was Major 3, and then they got hot and they, ran the table when they got the champ. So it's a pretty difficult thing to predict, but I just think like talent-wise, Hydra and Scrap were 2 of the best players in the league last season. I just that's the team that I just think has the best chance right now. If you're looking at like the percentages, it's probably like 35% LAT, 34% Optic, and then like whatever FaZe left over. But I could see any of the 3 of winning, so I'm not gonna count any of them out. And maybe if they want to use this as like fuel, or I'm sure there's a lot of people saying that FaZe is not going to win champs because they haven't won champs in a few years, and they underperformed last season. But I'm sure they have a lot of fuel to kind of light that fire and maybe make a run toward champs this season.
There might even be those fans who said, FaZe didn't win champs, but they won the Esports World Cup. So what's the real champs?
That's true.
I'm not one of those people, but some people might say it.
They got all the momentum, is what they're saying. And then champs MVP. So we've had 5 different champs MVPs as well. Pretty. I don't know. Like it's pretty interesting that the MVP for the regular season has never been the champs MVP of that season. So Shotzi won the regular season MVP. His teammate Crimsix wins champs MVP. Same thing happens the next season with Simp and Abizi. Then Celium wins regular season MVP in 22. Then Kenny, because LAT wins champs. Kenny wins the champs MVP. And then Hydra wins regular season MVP in 23. His teammate Kismet the Bulldog wins it at champs. And then last season, Simp from FaZe gets regular season MVP, and then Shotzi wins his first champs MVP and sticks his thumb in Ake's eye and tells him that he is a superstar. He wins champs MVP. So obviously, whoever you think is going to win champs, it's basically which player from that team do you think is going to win champs MVP, and who of the Atlanta FaZe do you believe will be the champs MVP?
Go with Sal.
I mean, I got him for regular season MVP, so that seems about right. I'll go with, if I'm going with LAT, I'll go with Scrap. I think he's just like going to rise to the occasion, and I think a lot of it comes down to moments and like what people, because you're not really looking at stats, because if you look at Crim's stats from 2020, he is not like, it's not eye popping or anything, but like he had really great moments and had the championship moments that people remember. I think Scrap, just by his nature, will be able to pull out some championship moments if LAT does win. So I'll go Scrap.
it would be a cool narrative too, right? Like especially after the whole reverse sweep against New York for Scrap when he was on Toronto, them not winning a single map in Champs Grand Finals. Like if he's able to, get rid of that curse, even though it was only a couple years ago now, but he's able to put that behind him and win a Champs MVP and get a ring. Like that'd be a pretty cool narrative.
I also could just see Ghosty winning it, like if LAT wins, because if you look at Champs MVP, it's never like the star player, like if you're looking at like the top billing, like Shotzi is like the most famous, most popular player on Optic, but like I think people going into it were thinking Dashy, Pred, something along those lines. Kenny maybe just because he's done it before, but then he wins it, and so I could see Ghosty just dropping absolute numbers at Champs and winning it, but we'll see. So that's our preseason predictions for this season. Feel free to hold us to that. And when, I don't know, Toronto makes the first roster change, you can credit me and say how great I am for my predictions. But we will be back. So the way that what we're doing this season, hopefully we'll be able to keep to the schedule. But like you see, we've done almost an hour and a half right now, just talking about power rankings and preseason predictions and talking about some of the stuff that's been happening over the past few weeks since our last podcast. But the way we're doing it this season is preferably to do a show on Sunday, a live show on Sunday night after the matches, and then the podcast and the YouTube video will go up Monday morning. Then we would do another podcast Wednesday night, so it'll be in your feeds on Thursday morning, and that will be just doing pick'em. We've talked about it before, and literally this happens every single time we do a podcast. But because we do the podcast typically on like Sunday or Monday, something will always drop on like Tuesday or Wednesday, and we never get to it until the following week. Hopefully, we do these shows on Wednesday night, and we won't get like almost like an October surprise or something like that equivalent. Maybe we'll get to these news like currently. So we're gonna try to do 2 shows a week. Again, live shows on Sunday and Wednesday, which will go up Monday and Thursday, and kind of split it up where we'll do pick'em. We'll talk about stuff that happened, between Sunday and Wednesday on the second show of the week. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully it is something that people will enjoy. We can kind of dedicate more time to the actual matches as we're recapping them and doing the pick'em for them. And I just think it'd be more fun. We can do a little more general talk and kind of break down like certain mid-season predictions or mid-season like recaps, something along those lines that we can get to dedicate more time to those segments than we have been currently doing. So hopefully you guys enjoy it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode in particular. Obviously, we're pretty excited. The CDL coming back for season 6 of the CDL. So it's been fun. I think this is the 4th or 5th season that we've done the podcast together. And we hope that you enjoy it. Hopefully you support it. We've got 150 subscribers on YouTube. If you are not currently subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do so. Just look up Ego Chall Podcast. You could go to twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast, and you can follow. That's a really good way to see when we go live with these episodes. But yeah, we will be back on Wednesday, December 4th, I believe it is. And then the feed will be updated December 5th. If you want to follow us on Twitter, he's at JBink with 2 Ks. I'm at Pres Byers. Podcast Twitter's at Ego Chall Podcast. Subscribe, follow, like the podcast feed wherever you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, like I said, Twitch. And the next show, again, will be a Wednesday night live show. Thursday morning podcast feed will be updated, and YouTube. So that's about it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yeah, thank you guys as always for all support. We are officially just a couple days away from the start of the season, so we're getting back into the swing of things here. And like Preston said, we're going to try and do a couple more shows a week now. And inevitably, what this means is that now news is just going to drop after we do the second show on Wednesdays. But we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But anyways, yeah, thank you guys as always. Hope you enjoyed the show today. felt like a bit of a longer one, but we talked about a bunch of good stuff. So should get everybody ready and get the gears turning for the season start on Friday, and we'll be back here in a couple of days to break down our predictions and whatnot for those couple matches heading up for week one, major one qualifiers. So yeah, that's all we got for now. Thank you guys as always.